this central contradiction in how we think about success.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're, running a huge company or just trying to manage your own budget, we have this instinct. We equate success with complexity, with spectacle, with being, I guess, fancy.
Right. There's a glamour to it. We see the result, the successful company, the wealthy person, and we assume there must have been some kind of incredibly complicated genius-level strategy behind it.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating, and what we're going to unpack in this deep dive, is that when you look at the biggest, most durable wins in business and finance, they almost all come from the complete opposite.
Yeah, it's a powerful bias we all have for this. We've gone through a stack of sources on these organizations that, they completely reshaped global commerce. We're talking about Walmart, McDonald's, IKEA, Costco.
A giant.
The absolute giants. And we've woven in these incredible personal finance stories from, Vanguard's founder and this one incredibly unassuming janitor. And the thing that connects Sam Walton, Ray Kroc, Ingvar Kamprad, Jim Sinegal, and John Bogle is this the shared, almost religious commitment to not being fancy.
And that's the key word, right? A commitment. Yeah. This isn't just about being frugal when times are tough. That's reactive. This is strategic. It's choosing to avoid complexity from day one because they saw it for what it was.
A liability, a long-term structural liability.
So our mission today is really to synthesize the core lessons from these system builders, the ones who chose boring, lean, standardized operations over the glamour. We want to give you, the listener, some really actionable principles to, aggressively cut that overhead and create more margin, that vital space in your own life and work.
And that idea of margin, it's so critical. The big idea we need to establish right up front is that controlling your expenses isn't just about saving money. It's not just defense, it's offense. It's a competitive weapon.
Awesome.
Well, the desire to appear successful, to have the fancy office before you have the revenue, or the huge team before you have a process for them to follow.
The classic startup trap.
The absolute classic. It creates what we call structural overhead, and that overhead is what actively prevents actual long-term success. It just eats you alive.
So, setting the stage, these founders weren't just cheap, they were strategically lean. You're looking at retail, fast food, furniture, finance, totally different industries. What's the one thing that stands out to you as the common thread in how they started? The thing that set them apart from the big, established players they were up against?
I think it's their fierce, almost stubborn refusal to accept what we could call status quo overhead. They looked at the accepted costs of their industries, the things everyone else just wrote off as, the cost of doing business.
Unavoidable.
Right, unavoidable. And they saw it as friction. They saw it as waste, not as a feature. In every single case, they found a way to attack the very structure that padded their competitors' bottom line. They just understood that margin, whether it's money, time, or your own energy, is the oxygen for long-term survival. And the most reliable way to create it is by subtracting, not adding.
Subtraction creates margin.
Yeah.
I like that. And if we're talking about weaponizing expense control, you really have to start with the master. You have to start with Sam Walton and the principle of running lean. The Walmart story, it's almost mythical now, but the origin back in Rogers, Arkansas in 1962, it wasn't glamorous at all. It was born from friction. Walton was already a pretty successful store owner, right?
Oh, yeah. He wasn't some kid with a dream. He was an established retailer. But he had this deep conviction about the deep discount model. The idea was simple. Take a much lower margin on each item, but sell a massive, massive volume.
And crucially, he believed this could work in small rural towns, the very places that the big dogs at the time, like Sears and Kmart, were completely ignoring.
And that conviction led him straight into a brick wall. He took his idea to the executives at the Ben Franklin variety store chain, who he was a franchisee for. These were the experts, the gatekeepers of the retail world.
And they told him no.
They rejected it flat out. They just couldn't wrap their heads around it. The margins were too thin. The logistics of serving these tiny, scattered towns seemed like a nightmare. They were comfortable in their big city model with higher margins and supply chains that had existed for decades.
Okay, so that moment of rejection, 1962.
Yeah.
That's a classic fork in the road. And this is where ego usually takes over for most people, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sting of that no makes you want to prove them wrong by being better, more sophisticated. You think, okay, they rejected the cheap model, so I'll show them. I'll make a more premium, more complex one.
You add a twist, you go up market, you try to build a fancy brand. You're essentially spending money on appearance to hide the fact that you don't have a bulletproof system yet.
But Walton did something so much smarter and way less ego-driven. He took their no as total validation. He realized their entire structure, their overhead, their logistics, their big city focus wasn't a strength. It was their biggest weakness. It was a cage they'd built for themselves.
So he committed to the harder path.
The much harder path. He went all in on no frills, total cost control. The encyclopedias note that the first Walmart offered this huge variety of goods in a no-frills setting. And that wasn't just, about saving money on paint and shelves. It was a core design philosophy. Efficiency was the goal.
Okay, so let's dig into that. Was this just, I'm a frugal guy? Or was it a really deep strategic choice driven by the specific market he was going after?
It was 100% strategic. Think about it. If your entire business model is based on serving small towns places with low population density, thin margins, and long, lonely roads connecting them, you simply cannot afford waste. Anywhere.
Your system has to be built for that pressure from the ground up.
Exactly. He didn't just open stores, he built a practical, powerful logistics backbone that enabled the low prices. The low prices were the result, not the starting point.
Okay, so detail that logistical edge for us, because this is the unsexy part, right? The trucking, the warehouses. But it sounds like that was the real engine of the whole thing.
It was everything. Walton knew that if he had to rely on the existing system, third-party truckers, scattered distribution networks designed for big cities, the cost of getting a box of soap to Bentonville or Rogers would just eat his tiny margin alive.
So his real competitive edge wasn't the price tag on the shelf.
No. It was the logistics control that made that price tag possible. So what did he do? He started clustering his stores. He'd build them around these massive, centrally located distribution centers that he owned. And here's the kicker. He started building Walmart's own trucking fleet.
Wow. Okay, so he's taking on this huge fixed-cost warehouses, trucks. That feels incredibly risky for a new venture.
It's totally counterintuitive, isn't it? But you have to remember, in those rural areas, reliable logistics didn't really exist at a price he could afford. By owning the distribution, he took an external vulnerability, a cost he couldn't control, and turned it into an internal capability, a cost he could manage down to the penny.
He controlled the entire supply chain.
That control, that unsexy, high-investment operational discipline is what made the whole model work. If you're always relying on others for your core operations, you're always surrendering your margin and your speed to them.
So this brings us to the core principle here. We need to define fancy, not just as a one-time splurge, but as a long-term liability, a structural overhead.
Yes. It's the fixed costs you lock into your life or your business because you want to feel legitimate or because you think it's just what you're supposed to do.
And fancy isn't always a diamond watch or a Ferrari.
Rarely. More often, it's the permanent expensive burden that requires you to perform at your absolute peak, constantly, just to maintain it. It's the expensive office lease you sign before you have predictable revenue.
It's hiring a 5-person marketing team before you've figured out a repeatable process that actually generates leads.
It's buying that industry-leading $1,000 a month software subscription when you only ever use, 2 of its features. You're paying for the potential of complexity, not the reality of your needs.
And on a personal level, it's adopting a lifestyle that requires a huge, stressful income just to keep the lights on. That overhead forces you into short-term thinking just to cover the bills.
And Walton's whole philosophy is the perfect antidote. His maxim was basically, control your expenses better than your competition. This is where you can always find the competitive advantage.
And it's an internal advantage, which is key. It's something you have control over no matter what the stock market is doing and what your competitors are up to. It's resilience.
Think about it this way. If your competitor have 30% higher fixed costs than you do, they need 30% more good luck just to get through a recession. You don't. That margin you've created is your strategic cushion. It's your freedom to act.
But let me challenge that for a second. There's a risk here, isn't there? When you strip everything down to the bare bones, don't you risk stripping away the brand, the customer experience, the very things that let you charge a premium? Walton's lesson seems great for a discounter, but what if I want to run a high-end service business?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer is that the principle absolutely still applies. The advantage isn't found in making the thing you deliver cheap. It's about making the system that produces the thing ruthlessly efficient.
Okay.
You can charge a premium price, but if your internal structure is bloated, too many meetings, complex approval processes, 5 different software systems that don't talk to each other, your actual profit margin is still tiny. Walton maximized his margin through efficiency and then passed the savings to the customer. You can maximize your margin through efficiency and just pocket the difference as pure profit.
That reframes it perfectly. The goal isn't just to be cheap. The goal is to be structurally sound. Most people have this backwards, don't they? They think, let's look successful, and then success will follow.
When the wealth building habit is always forward-looking, you have to earn the right to upgrade your fixed costs. Success demands that margin financial, time, energy to stay in the game long enough for compounding to work its magic. If your overhead is so high that you need a heroic, game-winning home run every single month just to break even, you're fragile. You're running on ego, not on sound economics.
So let's make this really tactical for people listening. Where do you even start to apply this kind of lean thinking?
You start by adopting what we call the no-frills baseline. Just decide what is good enough for your tools, your office, your systems. Then you treat any upgrade as a reward for hitting a specific, measurable result. It's not a prerequisite for starting the work.
So when you're looking at a new tool or subscription, the question isn't just, do I need this? It's, have I earned the right to this?
Yeah.
If that new tool is designed to solve a problem you don't actually have yet, but might have someday if you're successful, it's fancy overhead. Put it on a list and earn it later. And one of the most critical distinctions here, which Walton mastered, is the difference between fixed and variable costs. This is where people get trapped.
This is everything for resilience. Fixed costs are like handcuffs. They're the bills you pay every month, whether you make $1 or $1 million. Your rent, that software subscription, your salaried employees, keeping those as low as humanly possible gives you incredible freedom.
Whereas variable costs only kick in when you're actually making money.
Exactly. Variable costs scale with revenue. It's the cost of the materials to make your product, or commissions you pay to a salesperson, or a contractor you hire for a specific project that's tied to revenue. Strategic lean builders try to push as much spending as they can into the variable category.
Because they don't threaten the whole operation if business slows down.
Right. If your sales drop by 50%, your variable costs also drop by 50%. But if your whole cost structure is fixed, a 50% drop in sales is it's a catastrophe. You're bankrupt.
So the final check here is to run a really honest cost per outcome check.
Yes. For every significant expense on your P&L, you have to ask a brutal question that cuts right through the marketing and your own ego. What measurable result did this actually buy me?
And if you can't draw a straight line from that expense to a concrete outcome, more sales, a problem solved, a faster process, fewer customer complaints, then it's probably just decorative.
It's theater, it's fancy, it's overhead, and you need to cut it. It's about building a system that wins because it's lean and flexible, not one that needs constant heroic effort just to stay afloat.
That's a perfect transition. We've talked about controlling costs and logistics. Now let's talk about standardizing the work itself, which is the engine of scale. And that brings us, of course, to McDonald's. Okay, this is where it gets really fun because we move from, physical supply chains to human workflow. The story starts in San Bernardino, California, 1954. And the hero isn't a chef. It's Ray Krawczyk, a struggling 52-year-old salesman.
Yeah, he was trying to sell these things called Prince Castle multi-mixers, milkshake machines. And his life basically changed because of an anomaly in an order book. He got a massive order for 8 of these mixers.
From a single restaurant.
A single drive-in run by 2 brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald. Kroc knew that a typical busy 1950s drive-in might use 1, maybe 2 mixers. 8 was unheard of. It meant they were doing an absolutely insane volume of milkshakes. He had to go see it for himself.
But when he gets there, he's not finding gourmet food. He's not finding some fancy branded experience. He finds something way more valuable.
He finds efficiency, almost like an industrial ballet. The McDonald brothers had perfected this thing they called the speedy service system.
And what was that exactly?
It was a marvel of process engineering. They had stripped the menu down to almost nothing. Just the high-demand, easy-to-make stuff, hamburgers, fries, shakes, no customizations, no special orders.
No car hops, no waiting.
Nothing. And they had redesigned the kitchen itself to be like a little assembly line. Every single station had one specific, simplified, repeatable task. One person did patties, one person did buns, one person did fries. It was all about speed and consistency.
The genius wasn't the hamburger. The burger itself was, pretty basic.
Totally. The genius was the process that could deliver that basic product reliably and consistently in about 30 seconds. And this is the hinge moment, the insight that most of us miss when we're trying to innovate or build something.
How so?
Most people would have looked at that little hamburger stand and just dismissed it. It's just burgers. It's too simple. They confuse simplicity with ease. They think because it's easy to understand, it must be easy to copy, and therefore it's not very valuable.
But they miss the years of refinement that went into making it that simple.
That's the key. The brothers had obsessed for years over how to reduce errors and increase speed. Kroc, on the other hand, saw past the food. He saw the machine underneath the food. He recognized that the brothers had built a system that could be copied perfectly anywhere. And that repeatability, that was the key to massive scale.
He understood that the system protected the margin. If your business relies on a highly trained, expensive, temperamental chef, your costs are high and your quality is unpredictable.
But if your system is simple and standardized, your training time plummets, your labor costs go down, and your risk of errors basically disappears. A trained teenager could run it.
And that recognition is what led him to become their franchise agent. He opens his first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1955. And he doesn't try to add gourmet toppings. He just standardizes the existing process with ruthless discipline.
Which leads us to this core principle: predictability beats brilliance.
Say more about that.
Brilliance is amazing, but it's fleeting, it's hard to capture, it's expensive, and it doesn't show up every day. Predictability, on the other hand, is scalable and it's profitable. We often see that fancy is usually a disguise for uncertainty.
Meaning, if you're not confident in your core product, you just add more stuff to it.
Exactly. You add more features, more options, more complicated branding. You're decorating a weak foundation, hoping to distract the customer. The opposite is what the system builders do.
Which is?
If you can standardize the ordinary, you can scale it. McDonald's proved you don't need to be a genius every single day. You just need a system that guarantees the outcome is predictable and consistent, no matter who's working the grill on a Tuesday night. The system has to work even when the founder is tired or on vacation.
That resilience is what separates a single successful restaurant from a global empire. And you see this everywhere. In consulting, it's using standardized templates instead of writing every proposal from scratch. In software, it's shipping a small, core feature set that works, instead of promising a huge, complex platform that's always delayed.
Right. If your whole business depends on you having a brilliant idea every Monday morning, your business is incredibly fragile. Kroc's genius was realizing that consistency is a massive competitive advantage because it lowers all your hidden costs, training, labor, errors, waste, all the things that quietly kill your margin.
Okay, but let's push back on that a bit. Doesn't that kind of relentless standardization kill innovation? I mean, if McDonald's had stuck with just the original 3-item menu, would they even still be around today?
That's a great point, and the distinction is critical. Standardization doesn't mean fossilization. It just means that adaptation has to happen strategically, not chaotically.
Okay.
So when McDonald's introduced, say, the Filet-O-Fish, it wasn't some random idea from a franchisee that they just threw on the menu. It was a standardized edition based on clear data. A franchisee in a Catholic neighborhood noticed sales plummeted on Fridays. But that new item had to be engineered to fit perfectly into the existing speedy service system workflow.
So the test was always, can we make this new thing simple, cheap, and repeatable at massive scale?
Precisely. If the answer was no, it got rejected as fancy. It was too complex for the system.
So how do we apply this speedy service system to our own lives and work? Let's get tactical again.
You start by shrinking the menu. This applies to your products, your services, even your own daily tasks. If you're a freelancer with 15 different service offerings, you're creating massive complexity for yourself. Pick the 1 to 3 core things that drive 80% of your revenue and just delete the rest. Or at least pause them for 6 months. It forces you to be clear and efficient.
And once you have your core thing, you have to write the process down once. Stop reinventing the wheel every time.
Yes. Convert that repeatable task, onboarding a client, paying your bills, whatever, into a checklist. We suggest a 7-step checklist. Any more than 7 steps and your process is probably too fancy.
Why 7?
It's just a rule of thumb from cognitive science. People can hold about 7 pieces of information in their working memory. If your checklist is 20 steps long, it's got waste in it. It's got steps that exist for historical reasons or to cover for a lack of trust, not to actually get the job done efficiently.
The energy you save from not having to make those small decisions over and over,
Yeah.
that's priceless margin.
And the last thing is to track your cycle time. McDonald's was obsessed with the seconds between an order and a delivery. For you, it could be tracking the time from idea to shipped project or paycheck to money invested. You find the bottleneck, and that's where you focus your simplification efforts.
The big takeaway here is so clear. Boring isn't your enemy. Variation is. Build a simple thing you can repeat. That's how you scale. All right, so we've covered simplifying your internal logistics with Walton and your internal workflow with McDonald's. Now let's look outward. Let's talk about simplifying the external offer itself and fighting these hidden costs of just having too much stuff.
Yeah, these are subtle taxes on your business that IKEA and Costco basically engineered their entire companies to avoid. It brings us to Ingvar Kamprad and Jim Sinegal. We can start with IKEA, which is just a masterclass in designing complexity out of the product.
A famous IKEA flat pack.
Hmm.
It feels like it must have been born in some high-level strategy meeting, but the origin story is much more mundane.
Mm.
It's just a story about frustration.
Complete frustration. It's Elmhult, Sweden, 1956. An early IKEA designer named Gillis Lundgren is trying to get a table he just designed into his car for a photo
It
shoot.
doesn't fit.
Doesn't fit. Now, the traditional fancy solution would be to hire a bigger truck, get a special delivery service, but Lundgren looked at the table and realized the object itself was the problem, so he took out a saw and just removed the legs.
That's it. That's the moment.
That's the billion-dollar moment. That one simple act of removal was the birth of flat pack furniture, and it basically redefined global logistics for an entire industry.
Because it attacked what you called the silent tax of moving air.
Exactly. When you build furniture at a factory and ship it fully assembled, you are paying an enormous amount of money to ship and store empty space. The air inside the dresser, the air under the table, it costs money at every single stage: manufacturing, warehousing, shipping containers, trucking.
The flat pack lets you stack things densely. You can fit way more product in the same amount of space.
Dramatically more. And Kamprad, the founder, was so receptive to this idea because his whole mission was about affordability. He was obsessed with the idea that good design should be for the many, not just for a wealthy few.
And he had that great quote about mediocrity.
It's one of the best, he said. Expensive solutions to any kind of problem are usually the work of mediocrity.
Wow. That's just promote. He's saying that real genius isn't finding a complex solution that costs a lot of money. It's finding the elegant, simple one that structurally removes costs from the system.
Precisely. The flat pack wasn't just about using cheaper wood, it was about redesigning the entire system to be cheaper. And part of that redesign was brilliant. They outsourced the most expensive last-mile labor, the assembly, to the customer. In exchange for you doing that work, you get a radically lower price.
So flat becomes this really powerful metaphor for business.
It does. In business, going flat means productizing what is normally custom. If you're building a unique solution from scratch for every client, you're shipping assembled furniture. Flattening means you create reusable templates, frameworks, and modules that you can combine with minimal customization.
And in your personal life.
It means automating things to flatten the friction of decision-making, automatically investing every month so you don't have to wrestle with the decision. It's a form of emotional management.
Okay, that's flattening the product itself. Now let's shift to Costco, which attacked the silent tax from another angle. The tax of having too much variety. So Jim Sinegal and Jeff Brotman launched Costco in Seattle in 1983. And they take Sam Walton's love for logistics and discipline, but they apply subtraction to their product offering in this really extreme way.
It might be the most powerful example of strategic subtraction in modern retail. You walk into a typical Walmart, and they might have over 100,000 different items for sale. 100,000 SKUs.
Which feels like a good thing, right? More choice for the customer.
It feels like it. But then you walk into a Costco, and they have ruthlessly limited their entire store to around 4,000 items. And they didn't do that because they couldn't find more stuff to sell. They did it as a core strategic choice to destroy complexity.
Okay, unpack that for us. Why is stocking 4,000 items so much more profitable than stocking 100,000?
Because it simplifies your operations at every single level imaginable. Fewer items means fewer suppliers to manage. It means your inventory turns over incredibly fast, which reduces your storage costs and the risk of stuff going bad or out of style. It means your labor is simpler because your staff aren't trying to manage 100,000 different shelf locations.
But the biggest advantage is in their buying power.
Oh, it's immense. If Costco decides they're only going to sell 1 or 2 kinds of ketchup instead of 20, they can go to Heinz and say, "We are going to buy an unbelievable volume of this one product. Give us your absolute rock bottom price." And they get it. This focus protects the margin that they can then pass on to the customer.
And the whole system is locked in by the business model itself. This is the crucial part.
The
low prices are possible because Costco makes most of its profit from the membership fees.
This is just structural genius. If your whole business depends on people willingly renewing that annual fee, and Costco's renewal rates are famously high, near 90%, then you are structurally forced to deliver insane value to the member.
You can't start getting greedy on the product markups.
You can't. If management got fancy and started adding complexity or raising prices, people would start renewing. The membership model is a strategic barrier that prevents the company from becoming mediocre. It forces them to stay disciplined.
It's a built-in defense against becoming fancy. And the culture there reinforced it, right? Senegal himself was the opposite of a flashy CEO.
The complete opposite. He was famous for walking the warehouse floors with a simple name tag that just said Jim. He looked like a stock clerk. They spent almost nothing on advertising or PR. The whole company culture was about execution and system adherence, not about status or looking good.
So both Kamprad at IKEA and Senegal at Costco are showing us the same truth, just from different angles. Operational simplicity is where you find your competitive margin.
Kamprad removed the part that created physical bulk, the assembled furniture. Senegal removed the part that created operational complexity, the 96,000 unnecessary products. They both knew that when you're forced to choose, it's almost always better to remove an option than to add an expensive structural cost.
So let's turn this into action. How can a listener apply these ideas?
You start by asking that IKEA question. Where are we shipping air? In your work, what are the non-value add complexities you're paying for? The unused features in your software? The weekly meetings that have no clear purpose? The forgotten subscriptions? That's all empty space in your operation.
And if IKEA's solution was to flat pack, what's our version of that?
It's to standardize and productize. If you're a knowledge worker, that means creating templates. It means having clear standard tiers for your service instead of customizing every single proposal. Use reusable assets, standardize your inputs, use the same few tools, the same schedule, because as we learned from McDonald's, variation is a hidden tax on your time and your energy.
And the lesson from Costco gives us this idea of a markup rule.
Yes, and this isn't just financial. You need to enforce your own margin philosophy. Decide your value structure. For example, I will spend no more than 10% of my time on low-value admin tasks, or I will not take on a project that requires me to manage more than 3 stakeholders at once. That discipline protects your focus from the complexity that just naturally tries to creep in.
It's a powerful synthesis. Don't ship air and stock less. That lean-focused approach is the perfect setup for our final section, where we apply these ideas to the quiet long-term game of personal wealth and investing.
Okay, so we're making the turn from these giant billion-dollar operations to what might be the most important operation of all, how you build your own financial future. And in this world, the fancy trap is everywhere. It's complexity, it's hyperactivity, it's being blind to fees.
And we have to start with the patron saint of boring financial discipline, John C. Bogle, the founder of Vanguard.
So on August 31st, 1976, he launches the world's first index fund for individual investors, the first index investment trust. The idea was so simple, it was radical. The idea was, stop trying to beat the market. It's really hard, it's really expensive, and most of the pros fail to do it consistently. So instead, just be the market. Own a tiny piece of all the big companies and do it as cheaply as humanly possible.
But it wasn't a hit. Not at first. The launch was a complete and total public failure.
A disaster. They were hoping to raise $150 million. They raised a measly $11 million. The entire financial industry laughed at it. They called it Bogle's folly.
And again, here's that moment of rejection. This is where most people would have panicked and added some fancy twist, hired a star manager, added some complex trading strategy.
But Bogle just stuck to the raw, boring, undeniable math. And the math is so simple. Before costs, investors as a group earn the market return. After costs, investors earn the market return minus the costs.
In other words, the biggest and easiest edge any of us has as an investor is just to pay less and do less.
It's all in his maxim. In investing, you get what you don't pay for. The second you start paying high fees for the privilege of feeling smart, or active paying a high commission broker, day trading, buying complex products, you are structurally crippling your own long-term returns. You're adding overhead to your portfolio, and it compounds against you.
The index fund eventually won, of course, because the math just quietly did its thing for decades, while the fancy high-paid managers struggled to justify their own fees. It's the Walmart lesson for your money.
Yeah.
Reduce the structural cost of doing business to win.
It's the ultimate anti-fancy move. You are deliberately choosing the cheapest, simplest, most boring option and explicitly refusing to pay for the illusion that someone else is smarter than the market.
Okay, so from the innovator, Bogle, let's go to the ultimate quiet practitioner. I want to talk about Ronald Read.
This story is so important because it just completely demolishes the modern idea that success has to be loud and visible. Ronald Read died in 2014. He was 92. And his whole life, he was a working-class guy. He was a gas station attendant, a janitor.
He drove a second-hand Toyota Yaris.
He was incredibly frugal. He kept to himself. No one in his town had any idea about his financial life.
And then the reveal. After his death, they discover his estate is worth about $8 million.
$8 million. And he left these massive bequests to his local library and hospital. A total shock to everyone who knew him.
So how did he do it? It wasn't some lucky stock pick or a crypto lottery ticket.
Not at all. His method was private consistency. He read the Wall Street Journal every day, not to trade, but just to understand business. He was relentlessly frugal. He was patient. And he just invested in what he understood. Big, solid, dividend-paying blue-chip stocks. Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble.
And he understood the most important secret: make the gap between what you earn and what you spend permanent.
I have to stop you there because the Ronald Read story is almost an insult to the way we think about money today, isn't it? We're just bombarded with these messages that you have to be hustling, optimizing, signaling your success with the expensive watch, the fancy vacations. This man spent 92 years being completely invisible. He drove a Yaris. How do we square that quiet discipline with the pressure we all feel to show off?
That's the core conflict, you're right. That pressure to show success is a form of structural overhead. It's a fixed cost, the cost of status, that directly reduces your ability to actually build wealth. Reed just understood that wealth flows from the impatient to the patient.
And the fancy trap in investing, the thing that kills most people's returns, is what we can call precision theater.
What's that?
It's the constant tweaking, the forecasting, checking your portfolio 10 times a day, moving money around just so you feel like you're doing something productive. Reed refused to perform for an audience. He was only performing for his own ledger, in private, for decades.
His story just proves you don't need a lucky break or a fancy degree. You just need time and discipline applied to the simplest tools you have.
He's the ultimate anti-fancy hero. He bought simple, solid things, he held them forever, and he let the quiet power of compounding and dividends do all the heavy lifting.
So if we want to channel Bogle's math and Reed's discipline, what are the concrete, actionable tactics?
First, automate your investing. Today. Your future self is a terrible negotiator. If you tell yourself you'll invest what's left over at the end of the month, there will never be anything left over. Automate the transfer for the day you get paid. Make it non-negotiable, just like your rent. You're simplifying the process by removing your own weak willpower from the equation.
And what's the antidote to buying those complex, fancy funds?
Use the Can I Explain It test. It's simple. If you can't explain your investment, what it is, how it works, what the fees are in plain English to a smart friend who isn't a specialist, then it's too complicated. You shouldn't own it. If it requires a PhD to understand, you're probably just paying for someone else's PhD, not for better returns.
And the lesson from Reed about lifestyle creep is so critical, especially when your income starts to grow.
You have to consciously decide to make the gap between your income and your lifestyle a permanent feature of your life. That gap is the soil where wealth grows. If your income goes up 10% and your spending goes up 9%, you haven't gotten richer, you've just bought a slightly faster treadmill. Red consistently chose security over status, so that every extra dollar he earned went to work for him.
And finally, you suggest creating one simple, boring rule and sticking to it for a year.
Yes, it's a commitment to fighting variation. A simple rule like, I do not change my investment plan based on scary headlines, or I only look at my portfolio once every 3 months and only to rebalance, not to panic. These boring rules protect you from your worst enemy, yourself. And they let that quiet consistency do its work.
The maxim for this section is just perfect. Get rich in silence. Let the results be the only announcement you ever make.
What an amazing through line, right? Across all these completely different fields, we've gone deep on 5 systems, 5 personal habits that all built this durable, incredible success, not with a big show, but with this relentless, almost invisible simplicity.
It's really powerful when you stack them all up. We've really unpacked 5 core principles that seem to apply everywhere, whether you're running a global corporation or just your own household budget.
Let's quickly recap them. First, from Walton, run lean. Expense control isn't just defense, it's a strategic weapon. You create this internal margin that makes you almost immune to market shocks.
Second, from McDonald's, build simple. Predictability beats brilliance every time. A simple, repeatable 7-step system is better than relying on genius. You have to fight variation like it's the enemy.
Third, from IKEA's Camprod, flatten the offer. Actively design complexity and bulk out of your system. Find where you're shipping error in your work and productize what is normally custom.
Fourth, from Senegal like Costco, stock less. Operational discipline, like radically limiting variety and having a strict markup rule, is what protects your margin from the slow creep of clutter and complexity.
And finally, from Boble and Reed, Buy Boring. In the long game of wealth, consistency crushes complexity. The simple act of refusing to pay high fees for the illusion of sophistication is the fastest path to compounding.
And the central idea that ties all these giants together is this. Don't be fancy is not about living a miserable life. It's a tactical choice. It's about protecting your margin, your financial margin, your time margin, your energy margin, so you can focus your limited resources on the core things that actually create value.
Right. Complexity isn't a sign of sophistication. More often than not, it's just an apology for a weak or uncertain system.
Which brings us to our final charge for you, the listener. The most important choice you're going to make this year isn't about whether you should upgrade your laptop or get a nicer office space.
The real choice is whether you are building a lifestyle or a business that needs constant winning, one that requires you to be at 110% all the time just to cover your fixed costs.
Or are you building a system that wins precisely because it stays lean, simple, and consistent? A system that creates its own margin for error, for opportunity, and for growth.
That structural decision, choosing resilience and scalability over showmanship and complexity, that's the real difference between short-term excitement and long-term quiet security.
So we want to leave you with one question to think about. What is the one piece of fancy structural overhead, a fixed cost, a redundant process, a complex investment that you are paying for right now that is actively blocking your ability to scale and grow?
Find that one thing and then follow the designer's lead. Just remove the legs.